Hello there, everyone. How you doing today? I hope you're all well. Today we're going into r/entitled parents. If you enjoy, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and all that other stuff. Now, without further ado, let's get started, shall we? My sister-in-law thinks having kids entitles her to our family's cabin all winter. So my grandparents own a cabin near a ski resort, about an hour and a half from where we live. We used it a lot when I was a kid by most of the family, but there was a couple of years gaps when all my generation moved away from school that it sat empty. In the last few years, more of us have moved back and started using the cabin. It was easy to share, as only 5 of us use it, and we're all considerate that it's a family-owned place. So we message each other about availability and what essentials, like cleaning supplies, need to be replaced. This changed with my brother, his wife, and 3 kids. My sister-in-law always claimed to hate the place because it's not for entertainment. It's mostly a place for a few people to crash on a ski trip. So last year she put her kids on the ski team and went around the rest of the cousins to my grandparents directly saying she wants to use it more often. The grandparents were okay with this, telling them that as long as it's not reserved by others, she can use it. She proceeded to reserve every weekend that winter, not even using half of them. When I asked about getting a weekend, she was really weird about it over the phone. So I visited her to find a free weekend. When I asked her about having every weekend booked, she said, "We don't want it every weekend. We just want the ability to go every weekend. We don't want to decide until that Friday." She said that with a straight face, expecting it to just be normal. Well, I reached out to the other cousins that use it and found out everyone had gotten a similar response from her. Most had just moved back to town and assumed that was normal, because she's the only one with kids. We went to my grandparents as a group and explained the situation. They then changed the policy. Now each of us gets an even amount of weekends that we can swap with each other if we want. This pissed off my sister-in-law. She's been frantically calling all of us to get our weekends, saying stuff like she already invited friends, or for specific weekends, or her kids need to be there on certain dates. When that failed, she started texting all of us, demanding we not go on our weekends. Well, we all got the text together and went to our grandparents. Now sister-in-law can only use the place if she gets confirmation that none of us will be there. So basically, never. She's still freaking out, but it has gotten my cousins and I closer, and we've all agreed to be adults about it and just talk to each other about it when a conflict arises. Someone in the comments says, "What a shame your sister-in-law cannot be an adult too." I agree with that. What an absolute shame. Entitled boss took advantage of me for far too long. This story takes place in 2021. At the time, I was 20. I worked as a server/barista for a brunch restaurant. Overall, I liked my job, but the manager was the worst. She hated me because I was a threat to her job, according to her. I had ownership experience under my belt. I owned a restaurant with my family prior to this job. I expressed to the owners and her that I had no interest in her job, but she didn't care. The owners were open about wanting to replace her. She had awful reviews and a high turnover rate. She hated me from day one, always demanding I work the extra shifts, as opposed to asking me, giving me the menial tasks and coming in the earliest hours. Anytime I needed off for something, she'd get on my case about how we were a family and I had to pitch in. While I was tearing myself apart trying to please this lady, that's only just a few, but trust me on this one, she was awful. And this is what finally broke me. March of 2021, I needed surgery. I'm fine now, by the way. Doc said I'd need a week off. When I came back, I had a strict regimen from my surgeon about what I could and could not do. No heavy lifting, so on, so forth. I gave it to her and went over it. She put on that sickly sweet smile and said, "No problem, sweetie." It was a Saturday. I was alone on the barista bar, with a line out the door. 3 third-party tablets blaring, a 4-table section, and servers at the service bar bugging me about drinks. Now this next part is fuzzy, but this is what the coworker said happened. I was stumbling through the kitchen, eyes glassy and hands grasping for counters to hang on to. I was mumbling about making coffee when I promptly hit the deck, out cold. They said I was out for a few minutes. When I came to, I heard them on the phone with 911, and I said, "Hang up, because I cannot afford an ambulance." Standing over me was my friend and the manager, and the first words out of this woman's mouth were, "So when can you go back on the floor? We really need you." She didn't even ask me if I was okay. This was my first day back, for fuck's sake. That was the moment I realized she didn't even see me as a person, just a work monkey. So I responded and said, "You can accept my 2 weeks resignation," got up, and left. When my 2 weeks were up and I told her it was my last day, she asked if I was really serious about that. Like, yeah, bitch. I'm so glad I got out of there. Update. My mom thinks a court will give her my house. To give everyone who's new here a brief summary to the previous story, a mom was renting out to OP and thinks they're entitled to OP's house now. And the dad stuck up for OP, and the mom tried to divorce the husband. Now, for the update. I finally have an update for you guys. So all about the Disappointment Express. To back up, after the divorce comment, they are not, in fact, getting a divorce. They went and celebrated their anniversary at a casino. I did not speak to them for a week. This past weekend, I tried to speak with my father and get an apology, hoping he would be in a better frame of mind. He wasn't. He doubled down with the BS, saying they didn't realize, after all the stuff I put into the lease, that my house was uninhabitable when they moved in. It wasn't, by the way, and that they never would have put work into the house if they were just renters and so on. I asked them to specify, and they said stuff about the garage screen door, the shed roof. My husband replaced 2/3 of it with my dad's help. Dad did the other 1/3. And by God, the hose! The hose leaked, and he was upset about replacing it. That in no way affects the livability of the house, by the way, but in the words of my lawyer, "And you agreed to live there in its original condition, buddy. That's on you." Just like not reading the lease, my dad went on to say that all these things they were doing for me and not acknowledging a damn thing I was doing for them. At that point, I said some not so nice things, including the alcohol-induced dementia everyone mentioned. They wanted to know if they were still going to be able to take my son to the fair. Not a fat chance in hell. I told him I didn't want either one of them around my family until they stopped being delusional and decided to pay the increase or get out. I then cried when I got off the phone, and my husband was upset with all of this. Cut to today. My mother called me, asking what needed to be done to resolve this, because not being able to see my son was upsetting to them. I told them they needed to apologize for what they called me, and that they were out of line. Well, you guys, they were scammed. My parents were scammed. That's what this was all about. In my area, homeowners get daily calls and texts and letters from people wanting to buy their house. It's not new in the market. I've even told them these letters are trash. Well, my parents were getting calls from people saying they were going to be renting the house. They acted like they were representing me. Someone else also showed up to their house and was being very pushy about trying to see my mom in the house. This all happened before I mentioned the rent increase. So when my mom heard the rent increase, she thought the phone calls and this person was real. Like I was going to raise the rent to something they couldn't afford to and force them out. This was before I told them it was $3. But even after that, they thought I was throwing them out. I asked them why they didn't ask me, and they said they were scared and they had no place to go. I explained to them that's not how it works. I can't rent a place with tenants. There's a whole legal process, and they should know this. They apologized for how they acted, everything they said, and were embarrassed. They were even more embarrassed that they believed this person, and are officially old people that fell for a scammer because they thought they were smarter than that. They hadn't given them money or information yet. I told them they were probably setting them up for it. Scammers will pretend to be renting a house and take people's first, last, and security name when new tenants show up for the house. It is already occupied and they're screwed out of the money, or pretend they need money to let them keep living in the house. I have no idea why they believed or fell for that person, or why they never asked me in the first place, and since I didn't and wouldn't hire a representative for my one house. Their cameras were off when they came by, but they're going to file a police report anyway. I told them to call the police next time to file for harassment and trespassing if those people call or show up again. I got on my apology from both my parents. I explained everything in the lease and why it was legally written that way. I explained to them that I can't throw them out on the street on a whim, and as long as they pay the minimum amount of bills to live there, taxes and insurance, I was going to keep my end of the deal. So I guess that's my update. They're not getting evicted for now, but I might have to start monitoring them more closely to see if they fall for other dumb shit. That's a yikes in my book, OP. That's a yikes in my book. This entitled woman thought she owned the park. Justice was served. So this happened a few months ago and I still think about it. It was one of those rare moments when the universe actually balances out on a situation perfectly. I live near a park where a lot of people from the neighborhood go to relax, walk their dogs, or just hang out. There's also this homeless guy, I'll call him Tim, who's been living near the park for a while. Tim's actually a pretty nice guy. He doesn't bother anyone, always picks up after himself, and even helps clean the park sometimes. He's got a little spot with a bench and asks for blankets, 'cause that's where he stays. People in the community sometimes bring him food or coffee, and he never asks for anything. Well, one day I was out walking my dog and I saw this woman, classic Karen vibes, marching over to where Tim was sitting, minding his own business. She had one of those expensive yoga mats under her arm, and a tiny dog on a leash. You could just tell she was looking for a reason to cause trouble. She stops in front of Tim and starts berating him about how he shouldn't be in her park, and that he was ruining the view, and how he needed to get a job and stop being lazy. She was loud and drawing attention, but Tim just sat there, calmly explaining he wasn't hurting anyone, and he had every right to be at the park like everyone else. She, of course, wasn't having it. She threatened to call the cops and have him removed for trespassing, even though, may I remind you, it's a public park. A small crowd starts forming because she was causing such a scene. A couple of us tried to step in, but she wasn't listening to anyone. She eventually pulled out her phone and called the cops, making it sound like it was some sort of dangerous vagrant harassing her, which was a total lie. And here's where it gets good. The cops arrive, and this woman puts on her best, and I mean best, victim performance, saying how she feels threatened and unsafe with Tim around. Tim stays totally calm and tells the cops exactly what happened, but it's clear the woman expects them to side with her. But the cops don't. Turns out one of the officers knew Tim. The cop says, "Oh, hey Tim, how's it going?" They talk for a minute and it's clear this officer knows Tim isn't some dangerous guy, just a homeless man down on his luck who's never caused trouble. Then the cop turns to the woman and says, "Ma'am, this is a public park. Tim has every right to be here, just like you do." Her face completely changes. She starts sputtering, saying how it's unacceptable that people like him are allowed in places like this. She keeps pushing, asking if the officers can do something to remove him. The cop's response, "Ma'am, if you keep causing a disturbance, you will be the one removed from the park." And then, boom. It's like you could hear a pin drop. The crowd was loving it at this point. The woman huffed and puffed, grabbed her dog, and stomped away, clearly embarrassed that her entitled attitude had backfired. After she left, some people in the park came over and gave Tim some food and drinks, just to show support. The cop hung out for a bit to make sure everything was okay, and chatted with Tim like they were old friends. It was such a satisfying moment, seeing this entitled woman get shut down and realize that just because you're loud and obnoxious doesn't mean you're right. Tim's still there at the park, and now it seems like people look out for him even more. Justice was served. And that's the end of today's video. If you all enjoyed today's stories, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and all of that other stuff. Now I will see you all next time. Hasta la pasta.